Hey, the technical interview, pre-interview preparation. Now, my name is Alex Louie. Welcome back. I'm excited to be here because aside from a couple of slides that I have, I'm going to show you how to actually approach a job search and talk about a little bit about your resume. I'll talk about a little bit about my resume and see how we can go through it together. So a little bit pre-interview preparation that perhaps you may or may not know. Whenever you do schedule an interview, and I'm talking about an in-person interview, try to do it with about 5 to 7 days of lag time. Why? Because number one, you have time to research a company. So you may spend like maybe an hour a day just looking at their website and seeing what they're about, study the technology behind it. And then if you're initially just starting to interview, then it gives you an opportunity to actually prepare and rehearse what you're going to say when they ask certain types of questions regarding your experience and just the programming questions that they're going to ask. The other tip that I like to give is that try and always schedule interviews, in-person interviews in the morning. Don't do it in the afternoon because your research shows that you're most alert between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Actually, you're most alert when you first wake up. You're most creative when you first wake up, but you're most alert between 9 and 11 a.m. So if you want to, when you go in there, you're going to be pretty sharp. And a lot of people say don't drink coffee. I don't know. I tend to argue with that. I can say that I've I've gone to interviews where I have drank coffee in the morning and where I have not. I haven't taken a tally of when it has or hasn't worked. But I don't know. I wouldn't totally advise you not to drink coffee in the morning if you have a. The important thing is to have a routine when you do an interview outside of your work routine. So whenever you start building your interview capital, get set in a routine that you do when you're going to an in-person interview. And then create a binder with a folder with about 10 copies of your resume. Because sometimes you may go to an interview and the the managers there are very busy, so they may not have your resume on hand. And you can always kind of distribute this all over the place, and you won't be sorry you carried it around with you. So that's a couple of tips that I have for pre-interview preparation. Uh, we'll get into this in a little bit, so I can review the resume, and then I'll talk about the job search and all that, and how to answer certain questions. More pre-interview prep. Research the company and position you'll be interviewing for. So I'm going to go into that, how we're going to go about that, and make sure that when you do get an agenda, you read it over and research the people who will be interviewing you. And remember, this is more like a little bit of a battle, but at the same time, a romance. I like to think of it more, the more information you have on a person, the more you know about them, then the more you can talk about certain things. So one interview that I had most recently was I had a CEO interview with a CEO for my final interview, and I did a little bit of research on him, and I found out that he quoted a book. He wrote an article online, and he quoted a book from a book called From Good to Great by, I think the author is Jim Collins. And that was it. I mean, that was it. I read the book in about 2 days. I downloaded it on my Kindle. And when I went into the interview, I was totally prepared because I was going to quote that book and I was going to ask him about that article that he wrote. And I knew that his philosophy was managing companies the way that they talk about it in the book. So I asked him a lot of questions about regarding the book and if his management style was that way in terms of leading an organization. And once you do that, people tend to get very flattered when you do a little bit of research. I'm not talking about going to their house and finding their addresses. Just any activities that they have. Again, make sure you do your research at an academic or project level. Don't try probing people's background around if they like gardening or doing this. More at the professional level. The reason I took that route and that opportunity is because it was at the professional level. He wrote an article on companies, the company that he was heading during that time, and I said, you know what? The article was online, so it's useful to do my research on him because I wanted to know how he thought, for your own sake. Now, if he had an article on fishing, I would have never brought it up because fishing has nothing to do with the job. that in terms of the management job that I was going to take. So again, you got to know the difference. If he's talking about volunteering at NJIT and mentoring students, you can talk about that. You say, I did a little bit of research and blah blah blah. I know that you like doing this. So how do you consider that in relation to your role at X company, and would you consider doing that in terms of having a mentoring program at the company? So things you can twist around. Again, know the difference, right? If he's just talking about a hobby that he or she is gardening or just flowers, or they wrote a blog or something, I would not bring it up. I would not bring it up. So that's just a little bit of pre-interview tips. So let's get a hands-on experience on how you would answer or go about your job search. So let me pull up my resume here. And I talked a little bit about my experience here, and just in the prior videos, I talked about how I would phrase certain questions. So one of the questions that you're usually going to get is, tell us about what you're doing now. And the way I would answer that is I take a couple of points from my current position and I say, well, right now, I'm an expert in .NET technologies, and I'm also a performance manager and project manager. But my passion lies in development. Right now, my position is IT manager, but my real love is for development and mentoring people. Is there anything further that you wanted to know about my position currently? And if the person says yes, tell me about blah blah blah, then you can go into more. If no, then they'll probably move on to the next question, and you've answered that question, accordingly, because you've left him open to either wanting to know more or to move on to the next question. And you notice how I'm not that long-winded regarding that question. Now, another type of question if you're going into the more technical role is he may ask, "Well, what are you doing right now?" Well, what are you doing right now in your current position? So let's say I was a senior developer. So I would say right now I'm a senior developer. Actually, I'm a consulting manager in the using systems development team, and my role is to architect and design systems that have to do with the business. And the business that we work in is fund management, asset management. So I write applications using the C# .NET MVC4 framework, SQL 2008 backend, and a little bit of jQuery on the front end. I also am in charge of delivering presentations for new technology, and I'm part of a technical team that shares technology with everybody on the team so that we can use new things. So I'm considered a technical expert on the floor, and I enjoy the technical part of my job. That's it. I mean, you're not going into, well, I wrote a web service that, did a TCP/IP connect. You're not going to go into that in the beginning because, again, they just want to know high level what you're doing. Okay. And again, keep it a little bit long, but not too long. You don't want to talk more than a minute to 2 minutes because you want the interviewer to do the talking. Okay, you want the interviewer to do the talking. And then if the interviewer asks, well, I see that you're a teacher, then I could go into, yeah, I teach object-oriented programming, I teach C++, and he probably will kind of sway away from that, from the technical aspect. I enjoy technical interviews actually because I'm confident enough to be able to answer I would say most questions. I don't know the answer to everything. But that's a good example. So what if he asked me something that I don't know? One of the answers that you could give is, uh, let me think of an example. Let's say he asked me something about WCF service transmitting a TCP/IP, you know, and I can say I don't have experience writing TCP/IP binary transmissions using WCF, but I do have experience writing a WCF web service using SOAP, just a SOAP service, not any type of TCP/IP protocol, but they're using the HTTP protocol, SOAP protocol. I'm sorry, SOAP protocol. The HTTP SOAP protocol, where I did the following. I had numerous clients connect to my web service because they wanted to get some information from the database that they requested. If you want me to go into more detail of how we constructed the service, I can go into that if you like. So you see, I didn't initially say, no, I don't know how to write a TCP/IP WCF web service. I do have experience with WCF, but not the particular exact um, situation that he's talking about. Again, they're most of the time they're going to ask you questions around your experience because again, nobody knows everything. You know, you can't expect to go into a technical interview and for them to know everything. Now, the other questions they can ask is regarding syntax. Now, syntax is a little more difficult to answer because even I forget the syntax. So the only thing I can tell you, advise you on that is try and learn as much syntax as possible. And there's always technical questions online, so you can probably pick it up from there. But again, if you study your resume, then you can talk about so much of your experience out there and relate to what he's actually asking. Because I've noticed that all companies are the same. They have an input, they have a process, and they have an output. And all companies are going to have some type of night end jobs or processing jobs that either go through the night or do it daily. So again, you can relate yourself, your experience to them, because I'm sure if you're working right now, there must be some processes that you do during the night. Okay, some batch processing that you've done. Okay, now again, I'm assuming that you do have experience doing all this. If you've just been sitting around for the past 2 years, 3 years, and just been doing production support, you're gonna have to get a little bit more creative. You're gonna have to kind of twist it around so that you can look at uh, the processes that you do support but didn't write, and you can talk about how it was written. But again, it's a little more difficult if you've just been standing around for the last 5 years. So I hope that that is not you, but again, it's not impossible, but a little more difficult because you're gonna have to study your job a little bit more. Um, so that's a couple of tips that I have in answering questions on your resume. And again, have him talk. Have him do the talking. Answer questions 1 minute to 2 minutes, and then just have it an open possibility for him to either ask another question or move on. And if you don't know the answer, it's better to admit it and then twist it around and just kind of BS your way through the answer because then that's not going to work. You're kind of letting him on to say that uh, you're a liar, right? You're a liar. What you said on your resume is not true. So make sure that anything that you put on your resume is true so that you can talk about it. So let's take a look at the job postings right now. And I found this one called mid-level .NET developer, Velaro. Okay, so I click on that and it tells me all about the role. So here you can pick out so many things when they ask you, well, why do you want to apply to this job? Well, I want to apply to this job because when I saw it online, it said the word bleeding edge technology kind of sprung out at me. And I love working with technology. It's something I do after work. So when I see bleeding edge technology and I get to get work for somebody for it, then I'm all in. So why not apply to this company and for this opportunity? Look at their description of our culture. You can pick and choose and pick them apart. No job is too big or too small for anyone in the company. That means you're fine even our founder doing the most menial tasks if necessary. So again, you can pick apart this little thing right here. It's all in the job posting. I'm telling you this right now. It's not as difficult as people make it out to be in terms of technical interviews. So it's all in the job posting. So you can twist this so many ways. So if they ask about the company, then you can say, yeah, I read something that really, really caught my eye. That even the founder is doing menial tasks. So I picture him doing my laundry, and you can even be a little funny with it. I mean, it all depends. And here we aren't afraid to make mistakes, and you can obviously, everybody's into the failure thing right now, so you can say, I think I learned more from failure, and you guys have that culture, so I'd love to work for you. Then you have the skills, right? So then they're looking for MVC. So you better start studying up on your model view controller concepts and how to implement your model view controller concepts, SQL Server, source control. They use SVN. Okay, I don't have experience in this. I have TFS. So if they ask about that, I can say, well, I have experience using TFS where I branch. I've even written an article on how to branch a database project, blah, blah, blah. I've done jQuery Ajax, Bootstrap CSS, overriding my classes for styling. I don't have experience with MongoDB, but I do have experience with SQL Server. So you see how I can pick apart this description, and again, this comes with practice. I have years of practice. Um, So here he says, you know the difference between a .cs file and a .css file. That's pretty interesting. You have great enthusiasm from learning with enough humility. So the other thing is, don't only look at the job posting. So now let's go to the job site. So www.velaro.com. I have it up here. And just take a look at what they're about. And you have hours of research here. So you can go into the company. And then you can say why we stand out. So personal support, blah, blah, blah. Again, take notes on this and then see what questions you can ask regarding the company, because that's another big thing is you got to ask questions when they prompt you to ask questions. Our team. So let's look at who they have. Man, this is perfect. So if they're going to interview you, see who's interviewing you. If he's not on this page, then you can always go on LinkedIn and find who is interviewing you. But at least you know the players in here. I'm sure that this guy may interview you if he's the founder. It looks like it's a small company. So he may interview you one-on-one, and then even go into the blog and talk and see, what they've written, anything that comes out of you. So you can even talk about the blog. If you read one of their postings, just say, hey, I came across this blog that you guys have, and I read about X and X here. I thought it was interesting, and then ask a question regarding it. And they'll love that. They'll love that. They'll love hearing about themselves, because what do people like? They love hearing about themselves. They don't really, I mean, they care about you, but they love hearing about themselves or the company more than they do about you. And that's unfortunate, but it is fortunate for you, because then you have the secret formula, right? That means that you can go across any interview and just ace that. You can ace it. So that's it. That's about it for this video session. If you continue the video lessons, I hope these have been useful, and that's a couple of tips that I have for pre-interview prep. Next, I'm going to go into the actual interview day, and then I'll give you a little bit of tips on post-interview. Thanks for listening.